old dates on it.
Oh, it does. Oops. That's okay. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the What Are You Reading for July 6th, 2021. I am Ryan, the Digital Services Librarian, and we have with us today a set of librarians from around the county who are going to share with you some of their favorite books and things that they think you might want to read. If you're watching this, feel free to leave a comment and tell us what you're reading or comment on any of the books that we're talking about today. We would love to hear what you have to think and to see what you are reading. So, with that being said, we'll kind of dive right into it. Sherry, do you want to get us started with your first recommendation today?
Sure. My first pick today is Lady Sunshine by Amy Mason Doan. It has kind of Daisy Jones and the Six feel to it. So the basic premise is Jackie Pierce is a music teacher in Boston, and she inherits an estate from her aunt. She's surprised because she hasn't spoken to her aunt in years, and she only spent one summer in 1979 at the property. But she heads to California with the intent of readying the property for sale. She doesn't really have any intention of keeping it. However, her memories of the summer she spent with her uncle, who was a famous folk singer, her aunt, who was an actress, and her fragile cousin Willa kind of haunt her. So the book kind of unfolds like a mystery. It goes back and forth between present time with Jackie getting ready and then the summer she spent there in 1979. So you're kind of trying to find out why Jackie hasn't spoken to her aunt, what happened to all the members of the family, and why she only spent the one summer with them. Haunting, it's beautiful, and like I said, it has kind of a Daisy and the Six feel to it without being in like a diary format. Really good book. I've not read anything by the author before, but I really enjoyed this one.
All right, and we'll go to Nancy. What do you have for us first?
I read The Hunting Wives by May Cobb. It's on the bestseller list, so you may have to put a hold on it. And I really liked it. It's not what I normally read. I normally read historical fiction and a lot of war stories and nonfiction. So this one was kind of a whodunit murder with a bunch of overprivileged, snobby women, some mean girls. I didn't like the women because of that reason. They're just overprivileged. But Sophie O'Neill, the protagonist, just moved there and she wants so much to belong to this group, so much so that she has to ask herself, how much will she do to be part of this group? So it's a whodunit, it's a murder mystery, and it's pretty good. It's a light read. I finished it in a few days. So it's just a good summer read.
What drew you to it originally? You said it's not something you normally read. How did you stumble across this book?
Well, they always come across my desk. Either somebody turned it in or when I was looking for books to buy. I think this was one of the books that I bought. So I read the synopsis and it didn't take too long. Like I said, it's not the usual book that I read, but it was kind of a break between some of the heavy stuff that I read.
Sure. All right, Kristen, what do you have for us?
All right. Well, I'll start with something a little bit lighter because I normally like the darker stuff. So I read One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. She is very well known for her Red, White, and Royal Blue, which came out a few years ago. And this book is about 23-year-old August, who just moved to New York City. And she is kind of a loner. She doesn't really know many people, and actually she doesn't know anybody in New York City. And she doesn't really like to connect with people because she just likes to be by herself. And when she gets there, she takes up a room with these really eccentric people, and they are very interesting, and she kind of ends up like forming friendships with them because they're just so interesting and like weird, and kind of like she is, because she's an interesting weird person herself. And so because she's in New York, so she takes the subway a lot. And when she's on the subway one time, she meets this girl, and her name's Jane, and she's like beautiful and charming and mysterious, and like she has this leather jacket that's just like her signature thing, you know. And she's on the subway every single time that August comes on. Also rides the subway, and so August just gets this crush on her, and they it becomes the best part of her day seeing Jane on the subway. Well, come to find out, Jane is stuck on the subway. She's been there since the 1970s. So this book is like a romance mixed with sci-fi and time travel, and it's just such an interesting, fun book. There's drag queens and LGBT themes, and like just like a fun romance with some interesting elements in it. And I don't know, it's like, I don't know, like the Goodreads called it like magical and a big-hearted romance where the impossible becomes possible. And yeah, I loved it. It was fun. And I like I said, normally like the dark, creepy, like, you know, murder books, which is terrible. But this one, because there was a lot of talk about it because of McQuiston's Red, White, and Royal Blue, which I haven't read yet. I really wanted to pick this up, and I'm really glad that I did. It was great.
I know this might be a hard question because it seems like such a unique book, but is there something that you can compare it to story-wise, like another book or a TV show or something that it feels similar to, or is it just kind of its own unique thing?
I mean, it's time travel stuff, maybe Time Traveler's Wife, like something like that, but it is very unique in that it's like Jane is stuck on a subway where she can't leave the subway, so it's like August has to, if she wants to see her, they have to go to the subway, but like it's not like she can only see her, like everybody else can see her as well. So I mean, it did remind me of some things, but I can't quite think of it besides like the Time Traveler's Wife. But yeah, there's elements that reminded me of other stories, but also unique in itself. So but yeah, if you liked Red, White, and Royal Blue, I'm sure you would really like this too, because I know a lot of people really love that book too. So you would love this, and if you love like romance, and if you just love like a good book.
All right, Sherry, what do you have up for us next?
People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I talked before about Beach Read by this author, and I did like that one, but this one's even better. So Poppy and Alex meet in college. They couldn't be more opposite. Poppy's free-spirited. She loves change. Alex is focused on the future, and he likes things to stay the same. He's the type of person who, has a uniform. He wears khakis all the time. But they find common ground in travel, and they try to take a trip together every single year. And then we flash forward several years, and Alex and Poppy don't talk anymore. Poppy works for a fancy travel magazine in New York, and Alex is a high school teacher in Ohio. Poppy's kind of having a crisis. Nothing really makes her happy. The travel doesn't really make her as happy as it used to. And she realizes that the last time she was truly happy was when she was with Alex. So she reaches out to him, and they plan a trip to Palm Springs to attend Alex's brother's wedding. Hijinks ensue. There are all kinds of crazy things that happen to them on this vacation. But basically the premise is, will they recapture their friendship, or has it been more than friendship all along? The characters were great. They were both realistic and refreshing. If you're looking for a fun beach read, this would be the book to read. So good. I loved it.
This is like now is the weather where you might want a good beach read too.
Something a little lighter.
Let me ask you the same question I asked Kristen. Like, what would you recommend this, or what would you compare this to? Maybe book-wise, or even like TV or movie.
I mean, it's beach read by the same author, of course, and I'm trying to think of something like maybe The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren that I talked about last time, kind of a similar kind of vibe, with vacations and that kind of thing. But yeah,
Sure.
pretty similar, just kind of a light, fun read.
It makes me think of similar in some ways, and different in others, but thematically a little similar too. There's a movie that came out recently called Palm Springs that I really enjoyed, with Andy Samberg and I may be frozen here. I think the internet's going out. But let's move. There we go. All right, let's move on to Nancy. What do you recommend next?
I have a really good read if you like hauntings and ghost books. I usually read the witchy books or the war books, and it seems like there are more and more of the haunting books. So I tried this one, The Haunting of Bryn Wilder by Wendy Webb. She wrote Daughters of the Lake, and her stories so far, her last two, are set at Lake Superior. So usually anything with a Michigan theme, I'll snatch it up and read it. This one is really good. It starts out with a girl who loses her mother to cancer. So she goes for the summer to a boarding house and stays there, and she's helping her friends with summer weddings. A stranger died in room 5, so they have that door closed. But she starts having weird dreams that involve room 5, and she meets a handsome stranger, and her dreams make her feel like they're actually real, and she might have been several different people in previous lives. So there's the murder mystery. There's also a woman, a very sweet woman with dementia, who says some very accurate things that nobody else could know. So there's that supernatural portion in addition to the ghost, in addition to her weird dreams, and in addition to this handsome stranger that she meets. So there's kind of a surprise twist at the end that's really good. And the book only took me a few days to read because it was so good. I wanted to find out what happened. But her first book, Daughters of the Lake, that's really, really good too. So if you like the Michigan stuff, her description of the lake and the area up there, it's really pretty. And she's very good at descriptive writing.
There we go. What do you sort of enjoy about that kind of supernatural, witchy sort of genre?
I like to think that stuff exists. So normal people are finding that it does exist, and it's a good story. They're always really good stories, the supernatural stuff.
All right, awesome. Kristen, what do you have for book number 2?
All right, so different direction here. I'm going to talk about While Justice Sleeps by Stacey Abrams. And yes, it is by that Stacey Abrams. She wrote a book. It is a legal medical thriller. And actually, this is not her first book. She has written romance novels under the pen name Selena Montgomery. I've not read any of her romance novels, but I did read this and I liked it a lot. It was really good. This is her first book that's outside of romance, besides her nonfiction book. So in this book, Avery Keene is a young law clerk, and she works for Justice Howard Wynne, who is on the Supreme Court. And there is this big case that is in front of the court right now. And while this case is being discussed in the court, shocking news breaks out that Justice Wynne has slipped into a coma. And so this affects Avery because she is named his legal guardian and power of attorney. And no one knows why. So, and she doesn't even know why. She doesn't remember signing like any information about this. But then as the story progresses, she kind of figures out why she was named the guardian and power of attorney, what this case, the big case that was in front of the Supreme Court, like what this was about, and how all of this stuff is connected, like why he's in a coma, what's going on. And then there's all these other political and medical like things going on. It is so. Fair warning, there's a lot of legal and medical jargon that is used in this book. It is a lot. And it's sometimes I was like, wait, what? So like I'd have to look up some stuff because I had no idea. So, but if you can kind of get past that, it's a really good story and it's really intriguing and it's really like what's gonna happen next? Like you don't know. But it's so interesting, like the president's involved and like he's got like this whole story going on, like it's a fake like different name. Let's see. Yeah, so this is a really good statement here. It says okay, she begins to unravel a carefully constructed chess-like sequence of clues left behind by Wynne, and comes to see that he had a much more personal stake in the controversial case, and realizes his complex puzzle will lead her directly into harm's way in order to find the truth. So there's like chess is involved and like all of these different puzzles and different layers and like twists and turns, and like it is such a good book for her first outing into like a thriller and like everything. And I guess it's just the first book in a series. There's gonna be more. So I'm really excited to see how the series turns out. I mean, I'm a fan, so I'll be waiting for the next book in the Avery King series.
It's funny because even though I looked at the cover and I saw it, I assumed it was a nonfiction book, even though it says right in the cover that it is in fact a novel. I like skipped right over that, and I think it's kind of more impressive that someone can, I don't know, how do people find time to write a novel as well, also then doing so much else, and it's a whole other skill set of writing, an interesting novel, as well as all the other skills that she has to do the
right. I mean, and she was writing romance novels while she was doing all of her other political things, and then also writing this novel and doing like running for governor of Georgia and like and like working on the vote for Georgia. Like I don't know how she does it. Like she's amazing.
That's awesome. All right, Sherry, what do you want to talk about next?
The next one I want to talk about is By a Thread by Lucy Score. It's a full-out romance, but it has a lot of humor in it. So Allie's having a bad day when Dominic walks into the pizzeria where she works. He takes out his own bad mood on her. She reacts with some hardcore sarcasm, which gets her fired. Dominic's dinner companion, who happens to be his mother, is appalled at his behavior, and so she offers Allie a job at the company she owns, which also happens to be where Dominic works. So thus a workplace war has begun. They have names for each other while they're hating each other. He calls her Maleficent and she calls him Charming, as in Prince Charming. The banter's great. The book's just laugh out loud funny. I mean, every patron who's checked it out has come back and checked out other books by her because it's just so funny. But it also tackles some serious subjects as well. The reason Allie's working at the pizzeria along with like 2 or 3 other jobs is because her father has Alzheimer's and he is in an assisted living home and she's trying to pay for that. So there are some serious issues. It's kind of a fun romance to read this summer. I wouldn't recommend it if you want like a slow burn romance or a clean romance. It's a little steamy, but it is a good romance for summer, especially if you like some laughs with your romance.
All right, awesome. All right, Nancy, what do you have next?
I read The Vineyard at Painted Moon by Susan Mallory, and I would consider this a summer read. Took a break from my other type genres. I really like Susan Mallory. She's very popular. I think this book is on the shelf and you can get it now. And it's about a winery, and so I like those types of books so I can learn something new. I think wineries are interesting. So you get a few facts. But Mackenzie Danes is an elite winemaker, and she's part of this family by marriage. She's the only one who can produce the awesome wines, and her husband tells her he wants a divorce. So she can stay on as an employee, or she can go create her own winery, which she ends up doing. So she has to start from scratch, and that's interesting to go through that with her. But there's kind of a little twist. The night before he tells her he wants a divorce, they end up making love, and she finds out later that she's pregnant. So she loses her job, her home. Oh, and they live at the vineyard. So she loses her home, and her sister-in-laws have varying reactions, and they were her friends. So she loses her friends, her job, her home, her family, and she has to figure out how to put it all back together. So, and in spite of that, I thought it was a light summer read. So it had a good plot, and it only took a few days to read. So it was a really good book.
All right, awesome. Kristen, what else do you have?
Okay, so one of the last books I read, besides a book club book, if we're talking about it, is Cultish by Amanda Montell. And this is a nonfiction book that is about the way that cults use language as their form of power. So this was a really interesting book, and admittedly I picked it up because of the title, Cultish. I am very intrigued by cults, and especially because they talk about multi-level marketing and how they are cultish. That chapter was super interesting to me. But anyways, so as a whole, they talk about why so many of us kind of like binge Manson documentaries, and why do we fall down those rabbit holes researching why, you know, suburban moms join different cults, like you know, like those exercise groups. Like they talk about the soul cycle, and they talk about, like, they're thinking of cults very loosely. It's not only talking about cults as in like Jonestown or Heaven's Gate or the Moonies. They're thinking of cults as like something that you join that has some sort of language that makes you come together. Not necessarily just those modern ideas, like those ideas of cults, but it's kind of, so it's like thinking about, I don't, if you're, okay, I'm trying to think of how to say this without being offensive to some people, because I think some people don't understand that she does talk about like Amway or other things like multi-level marketing as a form of a cult, because of the way that they all kind of join together and do things. They have their own language, they have their own things that they do that are kind of cult-like. I mean, that's how she describes it, and it's kind of like, if you read it, it makes sense. And so this book could be a little controversial, but it's super interesting. And like she talks about the ideology, the community, the us versus them attitudes, you know, the like Scientology can be considered a cult. Like that's what it's about. So let me see. So it's like there's storytelling, there's talk about how she at one time her and her friend went to a Scientology center, and she talks about that experience. She talks about just different experiences that people also went through, like with Jonestown, with Heaven's Gate, with the Moonies, like with different things like that, and but mostly it's about the language and this, like like how you take those certain things that you hear and associate them with those certain things. It's super interesting. I do recommend it if you like to learn about that kind of stuff.
I think it's interesting too. Let me ask you this: what do you
Yeah.
think is it about, like cults, for example, that is so interesting to read about and learn about?
I think we want to know why, like why, like how people, why people do that. Like, why do they join these things? Why do they, like Jonestown? Like, what was it about Jonestown that made people go to Guyana? And it happened. Like, what happened there? Like, so she kind of explains, like, it was the language. Like, he was so charismatic, and of course Jones' first name's escaping me right now, but he was just so charismatic. His words, the things that he said, like, people wanted to follow him. And that's the same way with like all of these other cults, like Manson. Like, Manson was super like charismatic. Like, people wanted to follow him because of what he said. It's not like what they look like. It's not anything like that. People just, that's what they said. And I think that's why a lot of people are so obsessed with like learning about it. I mean, me included, is because, like, can it happen to me? We want to know why, and how, and will it happen to me, right? I guess that's it. I mean, what it comes down to, right? Could it happen to me? I don't know.
It gets really interesting. Check this out. I think I'll have to read it.
Yeah, I really recommend it. It's so good. I couldn't put it down. Like, I checked it out from Libby, and I don't know. But I'm also like, I listen to podcasts about him. I mean, that book, the Jonestown book that came out a few years ago. I mean, it's my thing. So.
All right, Sherry, what else do you have for us?
All right, I have The Discovery of Witches trilogy by Deborah Harkness. This is my absolute favorite book series ever. If Deb Harkness wrote a grocery list, I would probably read it. It's that good. So basically the premise is, what if vampires, demons, and by demons she doesn't mean the glowing eyes, evil creatures. Demons are she describes them as they walk the line between genius and madness. So a lot of your rock stars would be demons if that was the case. So vampires, demons, and witches, what if they shared the world with humans? That's kind of the premise of the series. I will admit that when the book came out and made the Times bestseller list, so many people said I needed to read it, and I refused. I was like, I don't read vampires. It's just not my thing. But then someone said, oh, it takes place in a library. And I was like, all right, I'll try it. I'm not going to like it, but I'll try it. Loved the book, flew through the first one, flew through the next two, and I reread them at least once a year. So in the first book, Diana Bishop, who's a witch, but she tries not to use her witchcraft, calls forth a book for her research while she's at Oxford University. The book's been lost for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, and when it comes to her, she realizes that it's bewitched. This also attracts the attention of Matthew Claremont, who happens to be a vampire and a scientist. He's studying creature origins, and he hopes this book can help. But pretty soon, Diana realizes that all kinds of creatures are following her around, and she's basically being hunted for the book. And this book this series kind of defies genre. It could be considered romance. It could be considered historical fiction. Obviously, with the different creatures, it's fantasy. There's some thriller aspects with some vampire murders going on. It's just so many different things. I'm anxiously awaiting. This is a trilogy, and it does have an ending, but then she's written at least one other book in that world. So I'm anxiously awaiting the next book. Don't even know what it's about, just that it takes place in the world, but I'm going to read it because I just love this series so much. There's so much when you reread it that you catch, because the author is a history professor, so she weaves a lot of the history and historical figures into the books. It's an amazing book series. I think Nancy's read it as well.
Oh yeah, yep, and watched the series. Yep.
Oh yes, and it's a TV series, and season 2 is on right now.
Yes.
So I feel like the kind of the idea, there's a lot of books that sort of deal with this sort of subject and these ideas, right? I guess what makes this one? What makes Deborah Harkness's writing appeal to you so much? What is it that really appeals to you?
It's very detailed, and she weaves in like so many historical aspects that reading it again is like reading a whole new book. Like, for example, Diana's last name is Bishop. Normally that wouldn't really mean anything in a book character. However, it all ties back to the Bridget Bishop in Salem, who was the first woman who was killed for witchcraft in Salem. So she's along the line of those bishops. And then in book 2, they travel back to, I believe it's 1590. So you come across characters like Shakespeare and Christopher Marlowe that you come across. It's just so detailed. And there's so much that you could kind of read into the books if you wanted to. It's amazing.
So good.
All right. Nancy, what do you want to talk about next?
I picked a series too because we're doing summer reading at the library and you want to get a lot of hours of reading in the summer. And I picked a teen fiction. I read a lot of junior fiction and teen fiction because I'm a librarian. I like good stories. I like to be in touch with those genres also to order and to be aware of. I picked the Great Library series by Rachel Kane. And it's so good. You can just fly right through these books. 5 of them. The first one is Ink and Bone. So imagine that the Great Library of Alexandria never burned, was never destroyed. And they've come to a level of power that is higher. They are the government, higher than the government, but they are in fact the government of the world. So, and that's a bad thing because they decide what information gets out to the general public. They don't allow printing presses. They kill anyone who just tries to discover a printing press or throw them in prison. This is supernatural. It's action-packed. There are teenagers who are chosen to be librarians in the Great Library System. And while they're being tested and going through their training, they quickly realize that this library is not okay, that they believe in something higher than what the library represents. So there's military teens, there's black market book dealers, royalty, different races, and they all come together to actually fight from the inside this great library. So it's an awesome series. I really enjoyed it. And all 5 books have already been written, so you can plow right through it.
It's always nice too. You don't have to wait for the rest. You hear the whole thing.
I had to wait for them, so it took quite a while, but they're all written now, and it's just a great, great story.
Alice left a message in the comments saying that it reminds her of Fahrenheit 451, which is interesting.
Oh yeah. There's a lot of different genres, and it's really quickly moving, and it's always good to review the last book when the new one comes out, although you can read them right in a row in this case. But yeah, it's really good. And the questions of right and wrong and what would you do, you're always thinking that as you're reading the story.
All right. So I think we have one last thing to talk about, which is a book I think we were all going to try to read, which is Tin Man. Kristen, do you want to introduce it and talk about it for a second?
Yeah. So actually have it right. Oh, you never mind. I don't even need it. Okay. So yeah, Tin Man by Sarah Winman is about 2 boys growing up in England, I believe. It doesn't really quite say, but I'm assuming it's England. Anyways, and it's Ellis and Michael, and I really love the beginning, the very first little prologue, I guess you could say, of Ellis's mom finding the painting. She is at a lottery, I guess, and it's her and her husband, and she's pregnant with Ellis, and she they're at a lottery, and she wins the lottery, and she has her pick of any prize. And this painting of the sunflowers by Vincent van Gogh is up there, and that's what she picks. She picks that prize, and her husband's mad because they wanted her to. He and like all the other men in the room were like shouting at her to pick the liquor, I guess, and she's like, "No, I'm picking this sunflower painting." And then the book kind of just is about the not really about the painting, but it's about art, and it's about friendship, and it's inspired. I think that the painting kind of inspires the book and inspires the, I guess, I don't know how. It's just like it's inspirational, like the book about how the friendship that the boys form, and I guess a kind of longing in a way, like they all kind of want something that is outside of what they are giving, I guess. Like you can tell Alice's mom wants something more, and she longingly looks at the painting of sunflowers. And so as the boys grow up, they're friends, and they become closer than friends, and then they drift apart, and then Annie, Alice's wife, enters the picture, and the three of them are always together, but then Michael leaves. So it's a beautiful book. I loved it. I don't know. There's more to it, but it's such an interesting book, and I think the time period is interesting in the way that if you think about how the boys were into like maybe the softer arts, I guess you could say, with like they like to read, they like to draw, they like to paint, and at that time it wasn't as acceptable for them to be into those things. And so thinking about the time period, thinking about their lives, and then thinking about as they grow older with the AIDS epidemic, and just, I don't know, it's beautiful and it's sad, and I don't know how I found this book. I don't even remember, but oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did. Sorry.
Sherry and Nancy, did you get a chance to read it?
Yes.
I did not.
You did not? Okay. What did you think, Nancy?
I didn't like it while I was reading it. It first starts out, well, first of all, she's an English writer, so there's that difference in language. It made it difficult to read. You had to plug into the book. And at first, when it starts out, Ellis is an old man, and he's worn down by life, and he's a little bit curmudgeonly. And then it switches, and then they're talking about Michael, and then they're back to Ellis, and it's at different points in their lives. And I wasn't paying enough attention because I never knew where we were at. So then maybe a quarter of the way into the book, I started paying attention. And by the end of the book, if you read the whole entire thing and think back on the book and all of its parts, it's a beautiful story. But it took that long for me. I kept thinking, well, I don't like it, but I'm reading it. But it's really short. It's a really short story. It's a short book. You can easily finish it in a week, a few days. But when you think back on it, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. But she flipped back and forth between Michael and Ellis and back and forth between time frames. So you just had to pay attention. You couldn't be doing other things. A lot of times when I read, I'm multitasking. So you just have to immerse yourself in the story.
I'm about halfway through into it right now, and I'm enjoying it so far. So I'm curious that I'm going to keep going and finish it all and see.
It was something that I wouldn't have read, so I got a mark on my summer reading to pick something that I wouldn't normally read. So I never would have picked it. So I was really glad that it was recommended.
Awesome. All right. I think those are all the books we had to talk about today. So if you are watching this at home and you enjoyed this, let us know. Leave a comment and let us know what you've been reading. And we will be back next month sometime, way sooner than we expect, I bet. The time just flies, especially in the summertime. So thank you for watching, and we will be back soon. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Good seeing ya.
Bye.